The rattling started at 11:43 p.m., just as Courtney Hall was cutting through the employee lot behind Mel's diner. She knew this route by heart, had been taking it for 2 years, ever since she'd started closing shifts to pick up the extra $1.50 an hour. The old Hartman building loomed across the street, all boarded windows and graffitied concrete, a corpse of the city's manufacturing boom that everyone had learned to walk past without seeing. But you couldn't walk past chains rattling. Even faint, even muffled behind brick and plywood, the metallic scrape cut through the parking lot silence like a knife dragging across a tin roof. Courtney stopped mid-stride, her rubber-soled work shoes squeaking against oil-stained asphalt. She pulled her phone halfway out of her apron pocket, the cracked screen glowing in the darkness. Nothing now. Just the hum of the interstate overpass 2 blocks down and a siren wailing somewhere in the West End. Maybe she'd imagined it. Maybe her brain was creating drama after 9 hours of handling drunk college kids and businessmen who thought tipping 15% made them generous. She started walking again, faster this time, keys already in her hand. She couldn't afford to linger, not in this neighborhood, not at this hour. $1,633 in her checking account. Rent was $1,250. That left $383 for groceries, the car insurance payment she'd pushed back twice, and the $100 she'd promised her Aunt Diane for the water bill. The math played in her head like a song she couldn't turn off. The sound came again, sharper this time, metal on metal, followed by something else. A low groan, almost animal, the kind of sound that came from a body, not a machine. Every survival instinct Courtney had learned growing up in the Eastbrook projects told her to keep moving. Mind your business. Don't be a witness. Don't become a statistic. She'd learned that at 14 when her cousin Trey got shot on a corner, and nobody who saw it would talk to police because talking meant becoming a target. But her feet had stopped moving. Her thumb hovered over the emergency call button, the blue light washing over her dark skin. And then she heard it clearly, a voicemail speaking what sounded like Korean, sharp and commanding, followed by the wet crack of something hard hitting flesh. Another groan, weaker, broken, desperate. Jesus, Courtney whispered into the empty lot, her breath fogging in the November cold. This ain't my problem. This is absolutely not my problem. She stared at her phone. 11:47. If she called the cops, they'd take forever to show up in this neighborhood anyway, and they'd want her name, her number, maybe even bring her down to the station. She'd miss her morning shift tomorrow. Mel would have her final write-up ready before she could explain. And for what? Some deal gone wrong in an abandoned building. Gang business. Drug business. Definitely not her business. She should go home. Should drive her beat-up Civic back to her studio apartment, heat up leftover rice, and forget she'd ever heard chains rattling in the dark. That's what any sensible person would do. But Courtney had never been as sensible as she was stubborn. Her mama used to say she'd inherited her grandmother's iron spine along with her high cheekbones. That woman had marched in '63 with a busted ankle and raised 4 kids working double shifts at a laundromat. Courtney barely remembered her, but she remembered the stories about a woman who helped people even when it cost her. "This is crazy," she muttered, shoving her phone back in her apron. Absolutely crazy. But her feet were already moving toward the gap in the chain-link fence, the one the city had fixed 3 times, but that always got cut open again within a week. Welcome back to the channel. Before we find out who is chained in the dark, comment below what time it is where you are watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The basement stairs descended into pure darkness, the kind that swallowed the weak glow from Courtney's phone screen after just 3 steps. She kept one hand on the concrete wall, feeling her way down, her work shoes scraping against grit and broken glass. The air got colder with each step, thick with the smell of rust and something else, copper, sharp and wrong. Blood. The rattling was louder now, rhythmic, desperate, chain against metal, someone pulling hard against restraints. Courtney's hand found the bottom of the stairwell, and she swept her phone light across the basement. The beam caught old machinery first, industrial relics covered in dust and graffiti. Then it found him. He was chained to a support pillar in the center of the room, arms pulled behind him, wrists bound with heavy links that looked like they belonged on a ship anchor. His white dress shirt was torn and soaked through with blood, the fabric clinging to his chest. His face was a mess, split lip, swollen eye, bruises blooming purple across his jaw. But it was the tattoos that made Courtney's breath catch. Ink covered his neck, disappearing under his collar, crawling up to his jawline in intricate patterns that looked like dragons or demons. She couldn't tell which in the dim light. His eyes locked onto hers, dark and alert despite the beating he'd clearly taken. He said something in Korean, urgent, almost a growl. Courtney took a step back, her spine hitting the stairwell wall. I can't understand you. He switched to English, his accent thick but clear. Go, now they come back. Who comes back? Go, his voice cracked with desperation, and he jerked against the chains hard enough that the pillar groaned. You should not be here. They will kill you. They will kill us both. Courtney's mind raced through her options. Call the cops, too slow. Run, leave him to whatever was coming, or do something monumentally stupid. Her eyes swept the basement again, and the phone light caught something in the corner. A length of rusted pipe, about 3 feet long, leaning against an old workbench. I'm not leaving you here, she heard herself say, already moving toward the pipe. You are insane, he said, but there was something else in his voice now. Hope maybe, or disbelief. Yeah, I'm getting that a lot tonight. Courtney grabbed the pipe, felt its weight, heavy enough. She moved to the pillar where a massive padlock held the chains. Turn your head, shield your face. He obeyed without question, and she swung the pipe down with everything she had. The sound of metal on metal rang through the basement like a gunshot. The lock held. She swung again, her arms burning, her breath coming in gasps. Again. On the 5th hit, something gave, the lock mechanism bent, and with one more strike, the shackle popped free. The chains fell away, and he collapsed forward onto his hands and knees, gasping. For a moment, Courtney thought he might not be able to stand, but then he pushed himself up, slower than she expected, every movement deliberate. Up close, he was taller than she'd realized, probably 6 feet, with blood dripping from a cut above his eye. Can you walk? Courtney asked, already reaching for his arm to help him. He pulled away from her touch, pride flashing in his eyes even through the pain. I can walk. Then we need to move, now. They made it halfway up the stairs when Courtney heard it, voices outside, speaking Korean, followed by the unmistakable metallic click of a car door opening. Then another, and another. The back, he said, gripping her shoulder to steady himself. There is a back exit. I don't know. I've never been in here before tonight. Then we find one. He pushed past her, moving faster now despite his injuries, and Courtney followed him back down the stairs. They crossed the basement at a stumbling run, her phone light bouncing wildly across walls and shadows. Behind them, the front door crashed open, heavy footsteps thundering across the floor above. He found a service corridor she'd missed, narrow and low, and they ducked into it just as flashlight beams swept across the basement from the stairwell. Someone shouted in Korean, angry, alarmed. More footsteps pounding down the stairs. The corridor ended at a rusted door with a push-bar exit. He slammed into it with his shoulder, and it gave way with a shriek of metal, spilling them both out into an alley behind the building. Cold air hit Courtney's face like a slap. Her car was 2 blocks away in the diner lot. Can you run? She gasped. He was already running. They sprinted through the alley, footsteps echoing behind them now, shouts getting closer. Courtney's lungs burned, her legs screaming from 9 hours on her feet followed by this insanity. They burst onto the main street and she grabbed his arm, yanking him toward the employee lot. Blue Honda there. She hit the unlock button and the Civic's lights flashed. They threw themselves inside. And Courtney jammed the key into the ignition with shaking hands. The engine turned over once, twice. Come on, and caught. She threw it into reverse just as 3 men rounded the corner into the lot, running hard. Courtney floored it, the Civic fishtailing backward, then slammed the brakes and shifted into drive. The tires squealed as she accelerated out of the lot, blowing past the men, close enough to see their faces in her headlights, hard eyes, weapons visible under jackets. She took the first corner too fast, the Civic's suspension protesting, then the next, putting distance between them and whoever those men were. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the wheel. Beside her, the Korean man was breathing hard, his head tilted back against the seat, eyes closed. Blood was seeping through his shirt onto her passenger seat. When he opened his eyes and looked at her, there was something in his gaze she couldn't read. Gratitude mixed with something darker. Calculation, maybe. "My name is Sanchi," he said quietly, "and you just made a very dangerous enemy." Courtney's apartment was on the 4th floor of a building that had been luxury in 1987 and was now just expensive. She half-carried Sanchi up the stairs, his weight heavy against her shoulder, leaving drops of blood on the concrete steps that she'd have to clean up later if she didn't want questions. Her hands shook as she fumbled with the keys. The door swung open to reveal exactly what her life was: a studio with a kitchenette that barely qualified as a kitchen, a futon that served as both couch and bed, and a bathroom so small you could sit on the toilet and wash your hands in the sink at the same time. Sanchi stumbled inside, and she locked the door behind them, throwing the deadbolt and the chain for whatever good that would do. He made it to the futon before his legs gave out, collapsing onto it with a grunt of pain. "First aid kit," Courtney said, more to herself than to him. "I've got somewhere." She was already digging through the cabinet under her sink, pushing aside cleaning supplies and old takeout bags until she found the white box with the red cross. When she turned back, Sanchi had his phone out, his thumb moving across the screen with practiced efficiency despite his injuries. "What are you doing?" "Calling for extraction." His voice was steady now, controlled, back to whatever he was when he wasn't chained in a basement. "My people will come for me. I will make sure you are compensated for your help tonight." Compensated? Like she was a cab driver who'd given him a ride. Courtney set the first aid kit down harder than necessary on the coffee table that was really just a milk crate with a board on top. "Your people. The same ones who had you chained up and bleeding." "That was not my people. That was," he stopped, his jaw tightening. "It is complicated." "Uncomplicate it. Because I just made myself a target for whoever those men were, and I'd like to know why." Sanchi looked at her for a long moment, and she saw him calculating, weighing how much truth to give her. "I run an organization, a syndicate. Someone inside betrayed me, sold me to rivals. I do not know who yet, but my lieutenant, Kwon, he is loyal. He will come." He pressed the phone to his ear, and Courtney heard it ring once, twice. Then a male voice answered, rapid Korean that even she could tell was urgent, almost frantic. Sanchi responded in the same language, his tone sharp and commanding. The conversation lasted maybe 90 seconds. When he hung up, some of the tension had left his shoulders. "He is coming, 20 minutes. We should clean these wounds so I do not look," he gestured at himself. "Like this." Courtney opened the first aid kit, pulling out antiseptic wipes and gauze. "You're going to need more than this. You need a hospital." "No hospitals. They ask questions. They report gunshot wounds." "I don't see any gunshot wounds." "Not yet." His smile was grim, "but the night is young." She started cleaning the cut above his eye, and he winced but didn't pull away. Up close, she could see the tattoos more clearly. Dragons, she'd been right about that, rendered in black and gray with touches of red. They wrapped around his neck like they were trying to strangle him, or protect him. She couldn't tell which. "What kind of syndicate?" she asked, dabbing at the blood. "The kind that does not answer questions from waitresses." "This waitress just saved your life." His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw something almost like respect there. "Yes, you did. Why?" "Because nobody deserves to die chained in a basement." "Many would disagree with you about that, especially regarding me." Before Courtney could respond, her window exploded inward. The sound came first, glass shattering, the sharp crack of gunfire, and then Sanchi was moving, faster than someone with his injuries should be able to move, tackling her off the futon and onto the floor behind the kitchenette counter. More shots punched through the wall above them, the plaster raining down in chunks. Her neighbors were screaming. Someone's car alarm started wailing in the parking lot below. Sanchi had his phone out again, screaming into it in Korean, his voice raw with rage. He hung up and looked at her, and there was something terrible in his eyes. Not fear. Fury. "It was Kwon," he said quietly. "My lieutenant, my friend, he tracked the phone, he sent them." "Your loyal friend." Courtney's voice came out higher than she intended, panic bleeding through. The one you just called. Yes, the word was bitter. 20 minutes, he said. They arrived in 8. He knew exactly where we were. Another burst of gunfire, closer now, from the hallway. Someone was coming up the stairs. Courtney's mind raced through impossible options. The window was 4 stories up. The door was the only exit. They were trapped. Sanchi was already moving toward her kitchen, yanking open drawers until he found her knife block. He pulled out the largest blade, tested its weight. How attached are you to this apartment? What? The fire escape. Where is it? There isn't one. This building doesn't. But Sanchi was already at her bedroom window, the one that faced the alley, and he slammed his elbow through it. The glass spiderwebbed, and he kicked it out, the shards falling to the alley below. We jump, he said. That's 4 floors. There is a dumpster. Aim for the dumpster. He was already climbing through, and Courtney heard the apartment door shaking, someone kicking it, the wood starting to splinter around the deadbolt. She looked at the door, looked at Sanchi disappearing through the window, thought about her security deposit, her lease, her entire life in this tiny box of an apartment. Then the door frame cracked and she was running for the window. Sanchi was hanging from the ledge, and he dropped just as she reached him. She heard him hit with a crash of metal and garbage bags. Then his face appeared in the dim light below, blood running from a fresh cut on his forehead. Jump, he shouted. Now. Behind her, the door burst open. Courtney didn't think. She climbed through the window, hung from the ledge for 1 heartbeat, and let go. Sanchi trusted his best friend, and that friend sent hitmen to kill him. If you believe loyalty is dead these days and you can't trust anyone, hit that subscribe button. Let's show the traitors we see them. The fall lasted forever and no time at all. Courtney hit the dumpster hard, the impact knocking the air from her lungs, garbage bags cushioning her landing just enough to keep bones from breaking. She rolled sideways, gasping, and Sanchi's hand was already gripping her arm, hauling her up. Move, he said, and they were running again. Her Civic was still in the lot where she'd left it, untouched by whatever hell had just torn through her apartment. She could hear sirens now, getting closer, and windows lighting up all through her building as neighbors called 911. Sanchi threw himself into the passenger seat, and Courtney started the engine with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Where? She asked, pulling out of the lot too fast, tires squealing. Where do we go? Away from the city. He will have people watching every hotel, I'm not asking for ideas, I'm telling you I don't have any. Her voice cracked on the last word. She just jumped out of a 4th-story window. Her apartment was destroyed. Men with guns knew her face, her address, probably her name by now. Everything she owned was either shot full of holes or would be seized as evidence. I don't have money for a hotel anyway. I don't have money for anything. I have $300 and whatever's in my gas tank. Sanchi looked at her, and she could see him recalculating, adjusting to the reality that she wasn't some wealthy Good Samaritan who could just disappear to a vacation home. She was a waitress with a negative net worth who'd made the worst decision of her life in an abandoned basement. Family, he asked, friends outside the city. Courtney's mind went blank for a moment, panic eating up her ability to think. Then it landed on the one place nobody would think to look because nobody ever wanted to go there. My aunt, she's about 2 hours east, the Hollows. What is the Hollows? You'll see. She drove, out of downtown, onto the interstate, putting miles between them and the city while Sanchi sat silent beside her, one hand pressed against his ribs where she suspected he had more injuries than just the visible ones. Every pair of headlights behind them made her stomach clench. Every exit made her wonder if they should take it, lose themselves in back roads and small towns. But gas cost money, and she didn't have money to waste getting lost. The Hollows announced itself long before they arrived. First the billboards disappeared, then the streetlights grew sparse, then the road itself got rougher, potholes appearing like wounds in the asphalt. Courtney took the exit onto Route 47, and the city skyline vanished behind them, swallowed by darkness and distance. This is where you are from, Sanchi asked as they passed a shuttered gas station with plywood over the windows. Born and raised until I was 16. Then my mom got a job in the city and we left. She didn't mention that her mom had called it escaping, that she'd made Courtney promise never to come back here, to make something of herself, to break the cycle. That promise felt pretty broken right now. The hollows proper started where the pavement turned to patched asphalt and gravel. Houses appeared, small and sagging, many with tarps on the roofs or cars on blocks in the yards. Chain-link fences, boarded windows, hand-painted signs advertising tax preparation and hair braiding out of living rooms, a corner store with bars on the windows and a hand-lettered sign that said no loitering. Courtney saw Sanchi taking it in, his expression carefully neutral. She wondered what he was thinking, if he'd ever been anywhere like this, if he knew places like this existed outside of movies and news reports about poverty statistics. "How much further?" he asked. "2 more blocks." She turned onto Carmichael Street, and the houses got even smaller, most of them shotgun style with peeling paint and front porches that tilted at angles gravity shouldn't allow. Dogs barked from behind fences. A group of young men stood on a corner despite the late hour, watching her car pass with eyes that missed nothing. Aunt Diane's house was the 4th one on the left, painted a yellow that had faded to the color of old newspaper. The porch light was on, which meant her aunt was still awake, probably watching one of her church programs or working on the word searches she bought in bulk from the dollar store. Courtney pulled into the dirt driveway and killed the engine. For a moment, neither of them moved. The silence felt heavy, full of everything they weren't saying about how badly this had all gone wrong. "Your aunt," Sanchi said carefully. "She will not call the police when she sees me. She'll have questions, a lot of questions, but no, she won't call the cops." Courtney looked at him, at his expensive watch and his blood-soaked designer shirt and his tattoos that screamed organized crime. "You're going to have to tell her something close to the truth. She's old, but she's not stupid, and she's seen enough in her life that you can't shock her." "What will you tell her?" "That I helped someone and it went bad. That we need somewhere to stay for a few days until we figure out what to do next." Courtney opened her door and the reality of what she just said hit her. A few days. Like this was temporary. Like she could go back to her life after this. And Sanchi, in there you're not a crime boss or syndicate leader or whatever you are. You're just someone who needed help, because that's all my aunt will care about. He nodded slowly, and Courtney saw something shift in his expression. Not agreement exactly, more like adaptation. Like he was putting on a different face for a different audience. They got out of the car, and the night air was different here, thicker somehow, carrying the smell of overdue rain and distant industrial runoff from the old textile mills. Courtney's feet felt heavy climbing the 3 steps to her aunt's porch. She raised her hand to knock, and the door opened before her knuckles touched wood. Aunt Diane stood in the doorway in her housecoat, her reading glasses pushed up into her gray hair, taking in Courtney's torn uniform and Sanchi's blood-stained shirt with eyes that had seen wars and funerals and everything in between. "Lord have mercy," she said quietly. "Baby girl, what have you done?" Aunt Diane didn't ask questions that first night. She just pointed Sanchi toward the bathroom with a stack of towels and pointed Courtney toward the kitchen table with a look that said they'd be talking later. By the time Sanchi emerged 20 minutes later, the water in the pipes groaning from the effort, Aunt Diane had laid out clothes on the couch. A pair of Uncle Raymond's old work pants and a plain gray t-shirt from back when he'd been alive and working at the bottling plant. Sanchi stood in the doorway holding the clothes like they might bite him. Courtney could see him processing the faded fabric, the frayed hem on the shirt, the way the pants had been patched at the knee with a square of different denim. These weren't fashion statement distressed. They were just worn out. "The shirt might be tight," Aunt Diane said from the kitchen where she was heating up something on the stove. "Raymond was a smaller man, but it's clean." "Thank you," Sanchi said, and disappeared back into the bathroom. When he emerged again, Courtney had to stop herself from starring. Gone was the crime lord in the blood-soaked designer shirt. In his place was just a man, lean and dangerous-looking still, but ordinary in a way that made the tattoos on his neck stand out even more. The pants were too short, showing his ankles. The shirt stretched tight across his shoulders. He looked stripped down, vulnerable. Aunt Diane set bowls on the table, white rice with butter, and a can of beans heated through, the kind of meal you made when it was late and money was tight and you had to feed people anyway. She added a plate of saltines and 3 glasses of tap water. Courtney saw Sanchi looking at the food, and she couldn't read his expression. He sat down slowly, like he wasn't sure of the protocol. "We say grace in this house," Aunt Diane said, reaching for Courtney's hand on one side and Sanchi's on the other. His fingers were stiff in hers, uncertain. "Lord, thank you for this food and for bringing these children here safely. Watch over them and guide their steps. Amen." "Amen," Courtney echoed. Sanchi said nothing. They ate in silence. Courtney was too exhausted to taste anything, shoveling rice and beans into her mouth mechanically. But she watched Sanchi take his first bite, saw the pause as he processed what he was eating. Not bad food, exactly. Just simple. Plain. The kind of food where you tasted every ingredient because there were only 3 of them. "In Korea," he said quietly, "my grandmother made rice every day. Just rice, sometimes with kimchi, sometimes with nothing." He took another bite. "I had forgotten." Aunt Diane nodded like this made perfect sense. Funny how we forget where we came from when life gets comfortable. After dinner, Aunt Diane made up the couch for Sanchi with sheets that had been washed so many times they were soft as cloth. Courtney took the spare room, the one that still had her cousin Marcus's old posters on the wall from before he'd gotten locked up 3 years ago. She lay in the dark listening to the house settle, the sounds so different from her apartment. No traffic noise, just crickets and the occasional dog barking, and somewhere far off, music playing from someone's porch. She must have slept because she woke to sunlight coming through thin curtains and voices in the kitchen. When she stumbled out, Sanchi was sitting at the table with a cup of instant coffee, watching Aunt Diane fry eggs in a pan so old the Teflon was mostly a memory. "Morning, baby," Aunt Diane said. "I was just telling your friend here that if he's staying, he's helping. I got gutters that need cleaning and a back step that's coming loose." Sanchi looked at Courtney like she might translate this into something that made sense in his world. She just shrugged. "Welcome to the Hollows. Nobody gets a free ride." After breakfast, Courtney walked him outside to show him around, though there wasn't much to show. Aunt Diane's house was on a block of identical shotgun houses, all of them slowly surrendering to entropy. Across the street, Mrs. Patterson was sitting on her porch in a wheelchair. An oxygen tank beside her. 2 doors down, the Martinez family had their front yard full of car parts, an engine block sitting on a tarp, while Mr. Martinez and his teenage son worked on it with tools that looked older than Courtney. "Good morning, Diane's niece," Mrs. Patterson called out, waving. "You home for a visit?" "Yes, ma'am, just for a few days." "That's nice. You bring your boyfriend." She was squinting at Sanchi with open curiosity. "Just a friend," Courtney said quickly. Mrs. Patterson's tone suggested she'd believe that when she saw evidence otherwise. "Well, you tell your aunt I still got those green beans I put up. She wants some, she just got to come get them." They walked further down the block, and Sanchi stayed quiet, but Courtney could feel him observing everything. The house where someone had tried to start a garden in the front yard, the plants struggling in hard-packed dirt. The corner store with the bars on the windows, and a sign advertising CHECKS, CASHED, and WIC accepted. The bus stop where 3 people waited even though the bus only came twice a day, and neither time was convenient for anyone who actually had a job to get to. "How long have these people lived like this?" Sanchi asked finally. "Forever, probably. This neighborhood's been poor since before I was born. Before my aunt was born, probably." They passed a woman walking with 2 small children, the kids wearing clothes that were clean but clearly hand-me-downs, sizes that didn't quite fit. The woman nodded at them, tired eyes missing nothing about Sanchi's unfamiliar face. "In the city," Sanchi said slowly, "there are restaurants where one meal costs $500. I have eaten at these restaurants. I have not thought about it." "Well, here $500 is rent money, or medicine money, or the difference between keeping the lights on and sitting in the dark." They reached the corner where the young men Courtney had seen last night were still posted up, different guys but same energy. One of them nodded at her, recognition, local seeing local. They looked at Sanchi with more suspicion, clocking his tattoos, his foreignness, trying to figure out what he was doing here. "Those men," Sanchi said when they'd passed, "they are dealers." "Probably. Not much else to do around here that pays." What do they sell? Courtney looked at him. Why, you thinking of buying? No, I am thinking. He stopped walking, standing in the middle of the cracked sidewalk like he'd been hit by something he couldn't see. I know what they sell. I know because my organization manufactures it. The synthetic compounds. We sell to distributors who sell to dealers who sell here. He was staring at his hands like they were covered in something he couldn't wash off. I have never seen where it ends up. A school bus rumbled past, ancient and yellow, and through the windows Courtney could see kids in clothes that had been washed too many times, carrying backpacks that had been taped and patched. Going to schools that probably didn't have enough books or working heat or teachers who got paid enough to care. Sanchi, Courtney said quietly, welcome to where your money comes from. Sanchi is seeing how the other half lives for the first time. It's unfair that some have billions while others can't afford bread. If you're tired of the rich ignoring the poor, comment, change the system below. The kids showed up on the third day, when Sanchi was on Aunt Diane's porch fixing the railing with wood screws and a drill so old it sounded like it might give up at any moment. Courtney was inside helping her aunt sort through medical bills, trying to figure out which ones could be paid and which ones would have to wait another month. She heard the voice first, young and jittery, talking too fast. Yo, Miss Diane got any work? I can take out trash, sweep, whatever. Just need like $20, maybe $30. Courtney looked out through the screen door and saw him. Maybe 17, maybe 20, hard to tell because addiction aged people in ways that had nothing to do with years. He was skinny in a way that said he forgot to eat, his clothes hanging off him, his skin ashy and dull. But it was his hands that told the real story, the way they wouldn't stay still, picking at his arms, tapping against his thighs, fingers moving in constant nervous rhythm. Sanchi had stopped drilling. He was staring at the kid with an expression Courtney couldn't quite read. Marcus, Aunt Diane called from inside, her voice gentle but firm. You know I don't have work today, and even if I did, I'd need you clear-headed for it. I am clear-headed, Miss Diane. I'm good. I'm real good. But his eyes were wrong, pupils too wide, and he kept shifting his weight from foot to foot like standing still caused him physical pain. When's the last time you ate something? I ate breakfast. The lie was obvious in the way he said it, too quick, too defensive. Aunt Diane sighed and Courtney heard her moving in the kitchen. A few minutes later, she came to the door with a paper plate covered in foil, leftover chicken and rice from last night. Here, take this home to your grandmother. And Marcus, that clinic on 5th Street, they got programs, free programs. I don't need no program, Miss Diane. I'm good. I just need. He took the plate, but his hands were shaking so badly Courtney thought he might drop it. I just need to get right, you know. Just need to get right and then I'll be good. He left, walking too fast, that jerky momentum of someone being chased by something invisible. Courtney watched him turn the corner and disappear, and when she looked back at Sanchi, he was still frozen, the drill hanging loose in his hand. You know him? She asked, stepping onto the porch. No, his voice was quiet, but I know what he is using. How can you tell? The pupils, the movement patterns, the way he cannot stop touching himself. Sanchi set the drill down carefully, like he didn't trust himself to hold it anymore. It is called Blue Heaven on the streets. We manufacture it in labs outside the city. Very pure, very addictive, very cheap to make. He looked at his hands again, that same gesture he'd been making since they got here, like he could see blood on them that wouldn't wash off. We sell it for profit. Maximum addiction, maximum return. Courtney sat down on the steps, suddenly needing to not be standing. You made that, what he's on. My organization makes it. I approve the formula. I signed off on the distribution networks. He said it flatly, like he was reading from a report. It was good business. The margins were exceptional. That kid is someone's grandson, someone's son. Yes, the word came out barely above a whisper. They sat in silence for a long moment, the afternoon sun beating down on the porch, the sound of kids playing basketball somewhere down the block filtering through the air. Normal sounds. Life continuing like it always did in places where people didn't have the luxury of stopping. How old were you when you started? Courtney asked finally. 16. My father died, left debts. I paid them the only way I could. He was staring at the house across the street, where Mr. Martinez was still working on that engine, his son handing him tools. I told myself I was surviving. Then I told myself I was building an empire. I never told myself I was killing people like that boy. But you knew. I knew the numbers. Addiction rates, overdose statistics, market penetration. I knew it academically. He turned to look at her, and there was something broken in his eyes. I did not know it like this. I did not know his name is Marcus and his grandmother is waiting for him to come home and eat chicken. Aunt Diane came out onto the porch, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked at Sanchi for a long moment, and Courtney could see her aunt doing what she always did, reading people, seeing past the surface to whatever truth they were carrying. That boy's been struggling for 2 years now, Aunt Diane said, settling into her chair with the grunt of someone whose knees didn't work like they used to. Started when his mama died and he couldn't handle the grief. First it was pills, then it was whatever he could get. Now it's that blue stuff. Gets it from those boys on the corner. The ones who work for distributors, Sanchi said. Who work for regional managers, who work for people like me. So you're in that business. Aunt Diane said it like she was commenting on the weather, no judgment, just acknowledgement of fact. I am. I do not know any more what I am. Well, sitting here feeling sorry about it won't help Marcus or any of the other kids around here dancing with the devil in powder form. Aunt Diane rocked back in her chair, the wood creaking. Question is, what are you going to do about it? I do not know if I can do anything. My own people tried to kill me. My organization is run by a traitor. I have no power here. Power? Aunt Diane laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. Baby, you never had power. You had money and fear. That's not the same thing. She pointed down the street where Marcus had walked. That boy, he's got a grandmother who prays for him every night, got neighbors who check on him even when he steals from them, got a community that keeps trying to pull him back even when he keeps running toward the edge. That's power, the real kind. The kind that doesn't disappear when someone chains you in a basement. Courtney watched Sanchi process this, saw him looking at the neighborhood with different eyes. Not seeing poverty anymore, seeing people, seeing the networks of care that held this place together even when everything else was falling apart. I cannot undo what I have done, he said finally. No, Aunt Diane agreed. But maybe you can stop doing it. And maybe, if you're smart and lucky and willing to get your hands actually dirty for once, you can start doing something different. Big Mike operated out of a garage behind his mother's house, the kind of place that had once been used for actual car repair and now served as headquarters for everything that happened in the hollows that couldn't happen in the light of day. Courtney had known Mike since she was 14, back when he was still in high school and already running things, back when respect meant more than money in this neighborhood. She walked up the gravel driveway with Sanchi beside her, and she could feel him taking in the scene. 3 guys playing dice against the garage wall, 2 more working on a motorcycle that had seen better days, all of them stopping what they were doing to watch the strangers approach. The Korean man with the neck tattoos and the waitress who'd gotten out and come back didn't make sense together, and things that didn't make sense got attention. Court, one of the dice players stood up, squinting at her. That you? Hey, Dree, Mike around. He's inside, but who's? Dree's eyes moved to Sanchi, taking in the borrowed clothes that didn't quite fit, the fatting bruises on his face, the ink on his neck. Who's your friend? Someone who needs to talk to Mike. That going to be a problem? Dree looked at Sanchi for a long moment, then shrugged. Mike don't turn away people who come correct, but if your boy starts any shit. He won't, Courtney said, with more confidence than she felt. The inside of the garage was dim and smelled like motor oil and weed smoke. Big Mike sat at a card table in the back, counting money with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been handling cash since before it was legal for him to have a job. He was 32 and looked 50, heavyset with a gray in his beard that made him seem wise, dangerous, or both. He looked up when they entered, and Courtney saw the moment of recognition, followed by surprise. Little Courtney Hall, heard you were back in town. Heard you brought some excitement with you, too. Mrs. Patterson said you had a boyfriend with tattoos like a Yakuza movie. He's not my boyfriend, and he's not Yakuza. Korean Mafia, then. Close enough. Mike set down the money and leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. So what brings the prodigal daughter and her gangster friend to my place of business? Courtney looked at Sanchi, giving him the floor. This was his play to make. Sanchi stepped forward, and Courtney watched him doing something she hadn't seen before, making himself smaller. Not physically, but in presence. Stripping away the authority he'd carried even when he was chained and bleeding. When he spoke, his voice was level, respectful. My name is Sanchi. I ran an organization in the city. A syndicate. My second-in-command betrayed me, tried to have me killed. He succeeded in taking my territory, my resources, my people. I have nothing now except the clothes borrowed from a dead man and the help of a woman who should have left me to die. Mike's expression didn't change. Okay, so you got played and you lost. What's that got to do with me? I want to take back what is mine, but I cannot do it alone, and I cannot do it with the resources I had before. Those resources are now controlled by the man who betrayed me. Sanchi paused, and Courtney could see him choosing his words carefully. I need different resources, different soldiers, people who know how to fight when they do not have money or technology or institutional support. You need street soldiers. Mike smiled, but it wasn't friendly. Let me guess. You heard about Big Mike who runs the Hollows, thought you'd roll up and recruit some disposable thugs to fight your war for you, promise us some scraps if we win. No, Sanchi's voice was firm. I am not here to recruit, I am here to ask, and I am not offering scraps. I am offering to burn down a system that has been poisoning your community for profit. My profit. That got Mike's attention. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. Say more about that. The synthetic drugs in this neighborhood, Blue Heaven, Crystal Dream, the others, they come from labs my organization runs. The loan sharks who charge 70% interest and break legs when people cannot pay, we finance them. The legitimate businesses that will not open here because the neighborhood is too risky. We make it risky because poverty and desperation are profitable. Sanchi's hands were steady now, his voice gaining strength. I built that machine. I profited from it. I did not think about the cost because I did not have to see it. Now I see it. So you feel guilty. That's supposed to make me care. No, what should make you care is that the man who betrayed me, Kwon, he will be worse. He has no ties to the old ways, no code, no restraint. He will flood this neighborhood with cheaper, more dangerous drugs. He will expand the predatory lending. He will squeeze until there is nothing left to squeeze. Sanchi looked around the garage, at the men watching this conversation with guarded curiosity. And when he is done with me, he will come for anyone who might challenge him. People like you. Mike was quiet for a moment, processing. Then he laughed, short and sharp. Man, that's the wildest recruitment pitch I've ever heard. Help me kill my enemy before he kills you. Also, I'm sorry for destroying your neighborhood. You got some balls, I'll give you that. I am not asking you to trust me. I am asking you to use me. I know how the syndicate operates, where they are vulnerable, how they think. I know Kwon. I trained him. Sanchi's jaw tightened. I can help you hurt people who need to be hurt, and if you kill me after, I will probably deserve it. The garage was silent except for the distant sound of the dice game outside. Mike studied Sanchi like he was a used car he was considering buying, looking for the hidden damage, the concealed rust. Why'd you really come here? Mike asked finally. To the Hollows, you could have run anywhere, could have left the country. Because she brought me here. Sanchi gestured to Courtney. And because running achieves nothing. I spent my whole life building power and it meant nothing when one person decided to take it away. I do not want that kind of power anymore. I want... He stopped, searching for words. I want to do something that matters. Revenge matters to you. Yes, but not just revenge. Change. Mike looked at Courtney. He for real, or is this some elaborate con? He's for real, Courtney said. He's seen what his business does here. He met Marcus. Something shifted in Mike's expression. Marcus was known in the Hollows, a cautionary tale that was still being written. That boy's dying slow. I know, Sanchi said quietly, and I am part of why. Mike drummed his fingers on the table, thinking. Finally he stood up, all 6 feet 3 inches and 250 pounds of him. All right, I'll hear your plan, but understand something, you're not the boss here. You're not in charge. You're a resource, like you said. A weapon we might choose to use. You got a problem with that? Sanchi met his eyes without flinching. I have no problem with that. Good, because the last thing the Hollows needs is another arrogant rich boy thinking he knows what's best for us. Mike walked to the garage door and called out, "Dree, get the others. We're having a meeting." The big corporate mafia thinks these street guys are nothing. If you love seeing the underdog fight back against the big bullies, smash that like button right now. They trained in the empty lot behind the old textile mill, the same place where kids used to play baseball before the equipment got stolen and never replaced. Sanchi stood in the center with 8 men around him, Big Mike's crew, plus a few others who'd heard there was a chance to hit back at the people who'd been bleeding their neighborhood dry. Courtney watched from the hood of her Civic, parked at the edge of the lot. It was late afternoon, the sun turning everything orange and gold, and she could see the dynamic shifting as Sanchi talked. At first, the men had stood with arms crossed, skeptical, treating him like an outsider who needed to prove himself. Now they were leaning in, asking questions, their body language changing from defensive to engaged. "You do not have body armor or automatic weapons," Sanchi was saying, walking in a slow circle. "But they do not expect resistance here. They expect to roll in with their SUVs and their guns and their confidence, and they expect people to scatter. That is their weakness. They have been powerful for so long they have forgotten how to fight people who are not afraid." "I'm afraid," one of the younger guys said. "I ain't gonna lie about that." "Good, fear keeps you alert. Fear keeps you alive, but fear alone will not stop them." Sanchi pointed to the buildings surrounding the lot. "This is your territory. You know every alley, every rooftop, every place to hide. They do not. When they come, they will come in vehicles. Heavy, expensive vehicles that do not turn fast, do not reverse fast, are easy to trap." "You want us to trap them?" Mike asked. "With what?" "With what you have. Stolen cars parked at intersections, construction barriers, nails scattered on the road." Sanchi's eyes were sharp, focused, and Courtney realized she was seeing him as he must have been before the betrayal, a tactician, someone who thought 3 moves ahead. "You force them to leave their vehicles and then you have equalized the field. A man on foot with a gun is just a man. You outnumber them, you know the terrain, you win." They spent 3 hours running through scenarios. Sanchi made them walk the neighborhood, pointing out choke points and escape routes, teaching them how to communicate without phones that could be traced. He showed them how to move in pairs, how to create distractions, how to hit and fade before the enemy could respond. Dree was the one who finally asked what they were all thinking. "When you say hit, you mean kill, right? You're asking us to kill people." The lot went quiet. Sanchi didn't hesitate. "Yes, Kwon will send professionals. They will not hesitate to kill you, your families, anyone who gets in their way. If you are not prepared to match that violence, then we have already lost." "Some of us got records," another man said. "We go down for murder, that's life. If we do this correctly, there will be no evidence. No cameras in this neighborhood that work, no witnesses who will talk to police, no bodies that can be traced back to you." Sanchi looked at each of them in turn. "But yes, there is risk. There is always risk. You must decide if the risk is worth what we are trying to accomplish." Mike stepped forward. "We've been getting picked off one at a time for years. Cops don't care when one of us gets shot over corners or debt. System's been killing us slow. Maybe it's time we killed back." He looked at his crew. "But anyone wants out, walk now, no shame." Nobody walked. That night, after training ended and the men dispersed back to their homes, Courtney found Sanchi sitting on Aunt Diane's porch in the dark. She brought him a beer from her aunt's fridge, the cheap kind in cans, and sat down beside him. "You're good at this," she said, "teaching them." "I have done it before. Different context, different soldiers, but the principles are the same." He took a drink, made a face at the taste, but didn't complain. "In my old life, I had men with military training, expensive equipment, connections to politicians and police. Here I have men with nothing, and somehow I feel more confident." "Why?" "Because they have something to fight for beyond money. They are fighting for their families, their neighborhood, their survival. That is worth more than any salary I could pay." He was quiet for a moment. "I should have learned this earlier. Maybe many things would be different." Courtney pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. The night was cooling down, crickets starting their evening chorus. "You think it'll work, the plan?" "I think we have a chance, a small one. Kwon will underestimate this place, these people. That gives us an opening." He looked at her, and in the porch light she could see the bruises had mostly faded, leaving his face clear except for a small scar above his eye. But Courtney, if this goes wrong when they come, you should not be here. You should leave, go somewhere far away, somewhere they cannot find you. I'm not leaving my aunt. Then your aunt should leave too. She won't. This is her home. And honestly, Courtney looked out at the dark street, at the houses with their dim porch lights, at the life she'd tried to escape and somehow ended up back in. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of being invisible. I saved you because nobody deserves to die chained up. But now I'm staying because these people deserve someone to fight for them. Sanchi studied her face like he was seeing something there for the first time. You are stronger than I thought. When I first saw you in that basement, I thought you were just a frightened waitress who made a mistake. I am, but frightened doesn't mean weak. No, his voice was soft. It does not. They sat in silence for a while, drinking cheap beer and listening to the neighborhood settle into night. Somewhere down the street, someone was playing music, old R&B that drifted through the air. A car passed slowly, the driver waving at them out of habit, the way people did in places where everyone knew everyone. Can I ask you something? Courtney said finally. Yes. When this is over, if we survive, what happens then? You go back to being a crime lord, back to the penthouse and the expensive suits and the system that destroys places like this. Sanchi took a long drink, draining the can. I do not know. I only know that I cannot go back to being who I was. That person is dead. He died chained in a basement. He crushed the can slowly in his hand. Who I become after this, I do not know yet. Well, Courtney said, standing up and offering him her hand. Maybe we figure it out together. Come on. We've got more planning to do. Mike wants to walk the perimeter again tomorrow, and we need to figure out where to position everyone. He took her hand and let her pull him up, and for a moment they stood close enough that she could feel the warmth coming off him in the cool night air. His fingers lingered in hers just a second longer than necessary before he let go. Together, he said. Yes, I would like that. They came at 4 a.m, when most people were either asleep or just getting up for early shifts. 3 black SUVs rolling through the hollows like they owned the place, windows tinted dark, engines purring with the confidence of machines that cost more than most houses on the block. Courtney was awake when the call came through on the burner phone Mike had given them. She shook Sanchi's shoulder where he'd fallen asleep on Aunt Diane's couch, and his eyes snapped open instantly, already alert. They're here, she whispered. He was on his feet before she finished the sentence, moving to the window, staying back from the glass. Outside, the street was dark except for a few porch lights, but Courtney could see the SUVs prowling slowly down Carmichael, looking for Aunt Diane's house, hunting. 3 vehicles, Sanchi said quietly, his voice steady despite what had to be adrenaline spiking through his system. That means 9 men, maybe 12 if they are packed in. Kwon is not with them. He would never risk himself for this. How do you know? Because I trained him to value his life above everything else. I taught him that leaders who die in the field are fools. His jaw clenched. I taught him too well. Aunt Diane appeared in the hallway in her housecoat, looking small and old in the dim light but not afraid. They coming for my house. Yes, ma'am, Sanchi said, but they will not reach it, I promise you this. I'm holding you to that promise, young man. She disappeared back into her bedroom, and Courtney heard the sound of furniture being moved, her aunt barricading herself in like they'd planned. Courtney's phone buzzed, a text from Mike. In position, wait for the signal. The SUVs stopped 2 houses down from Aunt Diane's. Doors opened and men climbed out, 6 that Courtney could see from her angle, all of them dressed in dark clothes, all of them carrying weapons that caught the street light, compact submachine guns, the kind that fired 30 rounds in seconds. Professional equipment. Professional killers. They moved toward the house in formation, and Courtney felt her heart hammering against her ribs. These weren't the men who'd chained Sanchi in the basement. These were worse. Clean. Efficient. The kind who did this for a living, and went home to dinner afterwards without thinking twice. The lead man reached Aunt Diane's front gate when the first car alarm went off. Then another. Within seconds, every car on the block was wailing, lights flashing, the noise shattering the pre-dawn silence like broken glass. The assassins froze, heads turning, trying to process what was happening. Porch lights started coming on up and down the street. That's when Mike's crew made their move. They came from the rooftops first, bottles filled with gasoline and stuffed with rags, the Molotov cocktails arcing through the air like falling stars. One hit the ground between the SUVs, flames spreading across the asphalt. Another hit the lead vehicle's hood, fire blooming across the expensive paint. The men scattered, professional discipline breaking as they realized they were surrounded. Gunfire erupted, the assassins shooting at shadows and rooftops, muzzle flashes lighting up the dark. But Mike's crew wasn't where they expected. They were in the alleys, behind parked cars, in the empty lots between houses, and they were shooting back with whatever they had. Hunting rifles, pistols, one shotgun that boomed like thunder. Not military-grade equipment, but enough. More than enough when you knew the terrain and your enemy didn't. Sanchi was already moving, out the back door while the assassins were focused on the front. Courtney followed him into Aunt Diane's backyard, through the gap in the fence, into the alley that ran behind the houses. They could hear the chaos on the street, screams and gunfire and car alarms still wailing. The second vehicle, Sanchi said, running low and fast. The driver will try to reverse to get them out. We stop him, they are trapped. They came around through Mrs. Patterson's yard. She was in her wheelchair by the window, watching the street with an oxygen mask on, and she gave them a small nod as they passed. The second SUV's engine was already running, reverse lights glowing white. Sanchi pulled something from his pocket, the improvised spike strip they'd made from boards and roofing nails, and threw it under the rear tires just as the vehicle lurched backward. The tires exploded with sounds like gunshots, the SUV listing sideways, and the driver's door flew open. A man stumbled out, weapon raised, and Dree was there with a baseball bat, swinging for the fences. The man went down hard. It was chaos and violence and desperate fighting in the dark, and Courtney realized with a sick clarity that people were dying on this street, where she'd learned to ride a bike, where Mrs. Patterson had given her lemonade on summer days, where normal life had been happening until she'd brought war home with her. An assassin came around the corner of a house, weapons sweeping, and found Courtney standing there. Time seemed to slow down. She saw his finger moving toward the trigger, saw his eyes cold and professional behind the gun sight. Then Sanchi was between them, moving faster than should be possible, a knife in his hand. Where had he gotten a knife? And the man was falling, gurgling, blood dark against his tactical gear. "Stay behind me," Sanchi said, his voice hard in a way she hadn't heard before. This was who he'd been in his old life, not the man learning to fix porches and eat simple food. The killer, the crime lord, the person who'd built an empire on violence. The gunfire was dying down now, individual shots instead of the sustained bursts from before. Mike's voice carried through the darkness, calling out in a pattern they'd practiced. "Clear north, clear west." Other voices responded, "Clear south, east clear." Courtney walked back onto Carmichael Street and stopped, staring at what had been a quiet neighborhood 10 minutes ago. 2 of the SUVs were burning, flames reaching toward the sky, black smoke billowing. The third was listing on destroyed tires, doors open, empty. Bodies lay on the asphalt, some moving weakly, some not moving at all. Mike's crew was emerging from cover, checking the fallen, securing weapons, moving with practiced efficiency despite their makeshift training. Big Mike himself was standing in the middle of the street with a rifle in his hands, and he looked at Sanchi with an expression that was part respect, part horror. Jesus Christ, that actually worked. "Not yet," Sanchi said, his voice still hard. 2 escaped on foot heading east, if they report back. "Already handled." Mike pointed down the block where 2 more of his crew were walking back, grim-faced. "Nobody's reporting nothing." Sanchi nodded, accepting this, and Courtney watched the reality settling over the neighborhood. They'd won. They'd actually won. A community armed with hunting rifles and homemade firebombs had defeated professional killers with military equipment. But the bodies on the street told a different story about what winning meant. Sirens started wailing in the distance, getting closer. Mike was already barking orders, his crew moving to scatter, to disappear back into houses and alleys, to become invisible again. The SUVs would burn until the fire department came. The bodies would have no identification. The neighborhood would tell the police they didn't see anything, didn't hear anything, didn't know anything. Because that's how the Hollows survived, by keeping its secrets and protecting its own. Aunt Diane came out onto her porch, surveying the damage, and caught Courtney's eye. "Y'all got 5 minutes to get out of here before those sirens arrive. Go." "Aunt Diane." "Go, baby. I'll be fine. I've been fine through worse than this." She looked at Sanchi. "You keep your promise now, you change things." Sanchi nodded once, sharp and certain. "I will." The traitor thinks he can just march in and destroy this neighborhood. If you can't stand bullies who think they own everything, comment, fight back, and subscribe to see them get what they deserve. The war ended not with a battle, but with a phone call. Sanchi made it 3 days after the ambush, standing in the empty lot behind the textile mill with Courtney beside him and Big Mike standing guard 20 feet away. He held a burner phone in one hand, and in the other, a photograph that one of Kwon's surviving men had given them before Mike's crew convinced him to talk. The photo showed Kwon in what used to be Sanchi's office, sitting in what used to be Sanchi's chair, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Aunt Diane's house. "Are you sure about this?" Courtney asked quietly. "No." Sanchi looked at her, and she saw the fear there alongside the determination. "But certainty is a luxury I do not have anymore." He dialed. The phone rang twice before Kwon answered, his voice smooth and confident. "I don't recognize this number." "You should recognize my voice, though." Sanchi kept his tone level, casual, like he was calling about dinner plans instead of a war. "Hello, old friend." Silence on the other end. Then carefully, "Sanchi, I heard you were dead." "You heard wrong. Your men in the Hollows are dead, though. All 12 of them. Would you like to send more? I have an entire neighborhood that enjoyed killing the first batch." More silence. Courtney could hear Kwon breathing, could almost feel him recalculating, reassessing. "Where are you?" "Somewhere you will never find me, but I found something interesting while I have been away. I found your money trail, the accounts in Singapore, the property in Vancouver, the safety deposit boxes in 3 different countries." Sanchi's voice hardened. "I found where you have been stealing from the syndicate for the past 2 years, siphoning off percentages, building your escape plan. The elders will be very interested to see this evidence." "You're bluffing." "Am I? Check your Singapore account, the one under the name James Park. I transferred 50,000 out of it this morning, just to prove I have access." Sanchi waited, heard the clicking of keys on a laptop. "See it." Kwon's voice came back tight with barely controlled rage. "What do you want?" "A meeting, tomorrow, noon. The warehouse district, Pier 47. You come alone, I come alone. We settle this like men instead of sending soldiers to die for our pride." "If I don't come?" "Then I send the evidence to the elders, and you spend whatever time you have left running from people much scarier than me. Your choice, old friend." He hung up before Kwon could respond. "He won't come alone," Mike said from his position. "He's not that stupid." "I know, neither am I." Sanchi looked at Courtney. "This is the dangerous part." She almost laughed, as opposed to the part where we fought 12 assassins in the street. "That was straightforward. This is complicated." He reached for her hand, and she let him take it. "If something happens to me tomorrow—" "Don't." "If something happens," he continued, squeezing her fingers, "there is a key in the Bible in your aunt's house. Inside the Book of Psalms. It opens a storage unit in the city, number 247. Inside are documents, money, everything you would need to disappear. Take your aunt and go." "I'm not leaving you." "Courtney, I didn't save you from that basement just to watch you walk into another trap alone." She pulled her hand away, frustrated. "We do this together or we don't do it at all." They did it together. The next day at noon, Pier 47 was exactly as abandoned as it needed to be. All rusted shipping containers and broken concrete. The kind of place where violence could happen without witnesses. Sanchi walked in from the north entrance with Courtney 10 steps behind him, both of them knowing that Mike and his crew were positioned in the containers with rifles, that this was as much theater as it was negotiation. Kwon was already there, standing in the center of the open space in a gray suit that probably cost $5,000. He wasn't alone despite the agreement. 4 men flanked him, all armed, all watching. He smiled when he saw Sanchi, but there was no warmth in it. "You look different," Kwon said in English, probably for Courtney's benefit. "Poor suits you." "Betrayal suits you," Sanchi replied. "The elder's chair, my office, my organization. How does it feel, stealing what you could not earn?" "I earned it by being smarter than you. You got soft, Sanchi, started questioning the business, talking about ethics, wondering if we were hurting people." Kwon's smile widened. "In our world, the moment you start caring is the moment you become weak." Perhaps caring makes you see clearly for the first time." Sanchi took a step forward. "I have a proposal. You step down. You return control to me. In exchange, I do not kill you or send the evidence of your theft to the elders." "Why would I accept that? I have the power now. You have nothing but a ghetto and some street thugs." "I have something more valuable. I have nothing left to lose." Sanchi's voice was cold. "You still have your life, your money, your future. Those are weaknesses now. They make you afraid to die. I am not afraid anymore." Kwon's smile faltered. His hand moved toward his jacket, and everything happened fast. Mike's crew opened fire first, precise shots from the containers that dropped 3 of Kwon's men before they could react. The 4th managed to get his weapon up, but Courtney was already moving, tackling Kwon from behind, using everything her daddy had taught her about fighting before he died. Go for the knees, disrupt their balance. Don't fight fair when your life depends on it. Kwon went down hard with Courtney on top of him, and then Sanchi was there, pressing a gun against his former friend's temple. "Do not move," Sanchi said quietly. The whole thing had taken maybe 15 seconds. Mike and his crew emerged from the containers, weapons trained on the survivor from Kwon's security. The man looked at the bodies of his colleagues, at the rifles pointed at him, and slowly raised his hands. Sanchi hauled Kwon to his feet, keeping the gun pressed against his head. "Here is what happens now. You call the elders. You tell them you are stepping down due to health reasons. You recommend they reinstate me. You transfer back everything you stole, every account, every asset. And then you disappear. Leave the country. Go to Vancouver or Singapore or hell for all I care. But you never come back. They'll never accept you back. Not after you vanished, not after the mess in the hollows. They will accept me because I will bring them something you never could. Reform. The syndicate will continue, but the predatory loans will end. The synthetic drugs will be discontinued. We will operate like a business instead of a plague." Sanchi's voice was steel. "And if they do not accept this, then I will burn the entire organization down from the inside. I know where all the bodies are buried, Kwon, literally and figuratively." 3 weeks later, Sanchi stood in his old office with new rules and old enemies watching him carefully. The elders had accepted his return, partly because Kwon's theft had been even worse than Sanchi had documented, partly because they feared what he might do if they refused. He'd shut down the drug labs immediately, restructured the loan operations, and started the slow process of changing what the syndicate meant. It wouldn't happen overnight, it might not happen at all, but he was trying. He kept an apartment in the city for appearances, but 3 nights a week he drove 2 hours east to the Hollows, to the yellow house with the tilted porch, to the waitress who'd saved his life and taught him how to live it differently. Aunt Diane always had dinner waiting, simple food that tasted better than anything from his expensive restaurants ever had. Courtney would be there fresh from her shift at a new diner. Rosie's had fired her for missing too many days, and they'd sit on the porch after eating, talking about their days like normal people, like they hadn't fought a war together, like they were just a man and a woman learning how to be together. "You look tired," Courtney said one evening, studying his face in the porch light. "I am reforming a criminal empire. It is exhausting work." He smiled, but she could see the weight he carried. "Some days I think it would be easier to just walk away from all of it." "Why don't you?" "Because walking away means someone else takes over. Someone like Kwon, someone who does not care about neighborhoods like this one or people like Marcus." He looked at her. "I cannot fix what I broke, but I can try to stop breaking it further." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "That's enough. Trying is enough." Below them, the Hollows was settling into evening, porch lights coming on, the sound of families gathering for dinner, kids being called inside. Normal life in an abnormal place, people surviving and sometimes even thriving despite everything working against them. Sanchi had spent his life accumulating power in penthouses and boardrooms, making decisions that affected thousands of people he never met. Now, he sat on a porch that needed repainting with a woman whose whole life savings wouldn't cover his car payment, and he understood for the first time what it meant to be rich. Not money, not power, not the throne he'd reclaimed. This, the warmth of her hand in his, the sound of Aunt Diane humming in the kitchen, the knowledge that he was becoming someone his grandmother might have recognized, someone his younger self might have been proud of. "I love you," he said, and the words felt new in his mouth, like a language he was just learning to speak. Courtney looked at him, and her smile was worth more than everything he'd lost and found again. "I know, I love you too." They sat together as the night deepened, just two people who'd found each other in the dark and decided to build something in the light. Not a kingdom, not an empire, just a life that mattered in a place that mattered with people who mattered. And somehow, that was enough. Sanchi found true love not in a palace, but in a poor neighborhood. If you believe real love matters more than money, hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching.